When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
Welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Nominated by President Joe Biden to be the United States Ambassador to Canada in July of 2021, David L. Cohen will end his tour of duty in this country when he returns home to Philadelphia over the weekend. It is our pleasure to welcome the United States Ambassador to Canada, David L. Cohen, into our studios. Ambassador Cohen, welcome to the show.
Elias, thank you, and thank you for allowing me on your air this morning.
And I know you're about to depart this country. This is one of your last stops. I truly do appreciate us. This is the exit interview, maybe, right, on being here in this country.
I'm not sure I want to call it an exit interview, but it is one of my last stops, and this is one of my very last media appearances, and I'm very appreciative for all the courtesy you've paid me previously, and really happy to be back on your air.
Listen, in light of everything that's happened over the last little while, I'm very proud to say I love America. I love visiting America, traveling. So I've always felt that bond. Now, I want to start off here because I do want to talk about Canada, U.S., obviously. The Prime Minister of this country, Justin Trudeau, was on U.S. TV very recently. I think it was on CNN. And he said, Canadians are incredibly proud of being Canadians. One of the ways we define ourselves most easily is, well, we are not Americans. Now, I don't know if I was too happy about that answer, but I figured I should ask you how you define Canadians.
Well, I would rather define Canadians as I would define Americans, in a positive way distinctive to Canadians and not by reference to another country. And I do think that the Canadians may have a bit of an inferiority complex, and always comparing themselves to the United States. And when I heard the Prime Minister's comment on that, and this is not being critical, it's sort of natural. The United States is the 800-pound gorilla in any room in which we sit. But I think it's unfair to Canadians to define Canadians by reference to the United States. And so the way I would define Canadians as being citizens of a country that stands for democracy, that defends incredibly important values nationally and internationally, that has a proud, more than 100-year tradition, a tradition of diversity and of being made up of diverse populations, of being welcoming, and of having these staunchly held values of the importance of democracy around the world, and being willing to stand up for those values and to promote them, to ensure that those values grow, again, both domestically and internationally. Yeah. And I know it sounds trite, but one of the things I've learned, because when I came here, people said you're going to love Canada because Canadians are so nice. Yeah. Canadians are nice. And I wouldn't be embarrassed about that, and I'm not embarrassed to say that. It's certainly for me, for my family, for the Mission Canada family, Canadians have been welcoming. They have opened their arms, and they have invited us into their communities, into their homes, into their local restaurants and bars and social clubs, into their local curling clubs and ice hockey rinks. And it is just a wonderful feeling.
I'd love to ask you about your curling game, but I guess that's another story.
My curling game is not anything to discuss publicly.
I understand that. Now, let me ask you this. Let's go back a bit. When you entered this role as ambassador, what kind of repair work did you have to do? Because I know it had been somewhat contentious between the previous Trump administration and officials here in Canada. So when you entered the role, take us back a bit. What kind of repair work have you done over the last few years?
So, look, this was a great job to go into because the relationship was so strong. I mean, our trade relationship was strong. When I came here, the United States, Canada was the United States' number one trading partner. Right. When I'm leaving here, Canada is the United States' number one trading partner. But one thing I discovered that I wasn't prepared for was that there had been a significant loss of trust on the part of Canadians for the United States and the United States relationship. I saw this and felt it anecdotally and impressionistically. I saw it in the polling. And I did a lot of work and consciously set aside to do a lot of work to rebuild that relationship of trust. And I think we've been pretty successful in doing that. And I don't blame that on any particular administration. I really don't. Global times are difficult. They're challenged. But I think it was very important to me, very important to President Biden, that we restore this unique, trusted, close relationship between the United States and Canada, and I think we were able to do that.
In any relationship, there will be frustrations on both sides. Did you have frustrations with Canada in your years as ambassador?
Frustrations is too strong a word. I think in any healthy relationship, there will be differences of opinion. In the trade context, there were and are differences of opinion over dairy and dairy supply agreements. There were and are differences of opinion over softwood lumber and the preferential treatment that Canada provides to Canadian softwood lumber producers, which results in the need for countervailing tariffs. I think that one of the hallmarks of my service as U.S. Ambassador to Canada was a healthy respect for Canada's sovereignty and for its need and ability to make its own decisions on matters of national importance to Canada. So we struggled to reach an accommodation for how Canada would support Haiti. By way of example, no secret that we asked Canada to lead a multinational force in Haiti. Canada was uncomfortable doing that, and we ended up with Canada not leading that multinational force, but Canada still has stepped up, and behind the United States is this number two funder for the multinational force that is helping to stabilize Haiti.
Have decisions like that led to Canada losing standing? There's no question there have been some international alliances the United States is part of that Canada was not invited to. And I know there's all various factors with different alliances around the world, but there are a lot of people that said Canada's lost its standing, we're losing our standing in the world. And I wonder if a decision like that, not to take the lead in Haiti, has led the United States to question Canada at times and maybe not include them in other things.
So the direct answer to your question is no. I think we understood what Canada's concerns were. And as I said, Canada stepped up to be the number two funder behind the United States in Haiti. I do think that Canada's underinvestment in defense overall has led to a loss of standing on the part of Canada in the international community, particularly in the NATO community. And I think that Canada maybe has suffered from not being in a position to step up in the defense and security context the way that a lot of nations wish that Canada would be able to do so, just because it does not have the capacity to do so.
Has that strained, the relationship between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? How has that relationship been?
So that relationship has been excellent. There is a very close personal relationship between the two men, and it's a relationship that they both value. I've heard from both of them how important the personal relationship is, and I think that it wasn't a mistake when Joe Biden came to Canada in March of 2023 and said on 5 separate occasions, by my count, that the United States has no better friend, partner, or ally than Canada, and he really believes that. And a lot of that derives from the close personal relationship that exists between Prime Minister Trudeau and President Biden.
All right, we're back here with the United States Ambassador to Canada, David L. Cohen, who will end his run as ambassador this weekend when he hops on a plane and heads back to Philadelphia. Ambassador Cohen, I just want to recap something we touched upon on the break, that in order to, one of the reasons why perhaps you said yes to this role, one of the ways you were swayed was you were presented with the Montreal Expos cap. Is that the story here?
For this role. I said I was being lobbied
okay.
by a reasonably prominent Quebec elected official that is there any way I could help to bring baseball? You can't bring the Expos back, to bring baseball back to Montreal. And in that meeting, he presented me with a classic vintage Montreal Expos baseball cap.
Oh, I love that. Okay, well, this is a great segue to our next topic. Yesterday, you probably saw this, the Premier of Ontario and his hat, Doug Ford's hat, which said Canada is not for sale. We talked in the last half about repairing relationships. Are you worried that, you're come the inauguration day and what's coming up next, are you worried that the relationship is becoming more and more contentious? We've seen the threats from President-elect Donald Trump. Do you have concerns about what you've built over the last few years and what will happen come Monday?
So I'm really reluctant to comment on President-elect Trump just because everything he says at this point is a hypothetical. Mm-hmm. I hate answering hypothetical questions. But I mean, of course I have a concern. I mean, I have come to, after doing this job for 3+ years, I'm more patriotic than I've ever been. I'm incredibly proud of my country, proud of the role that it plays on the global stage. But I don't mind saying that I've fallen in love with Canada too. And I particularly think that the relationship between our two countries is incredibly important, incredibly valuable. And it hurts to sort of see the contention and to see the concern that is being created in Canada by the president-elect's comments and by some of the things that, hypothetically speaking, because until he's president, he does not have the ability to implement any of the things that he is talking about. And so, of course, it's a concern. At the end of the day, and you can accuse me of being a relentless optimist. At the end of the day, I think this relationship between our two countries is too strong, too powerful, too widespread. It's beyond whoever the president is. It's beyond whoever the prime minister is, because you can throw into the mix the inevitable now change in prime ministers, the likely change in parties, in control of the Canadian government, and in this uncertainty of changes in administrations in both countries, there is uncertainty. There is a little bit of chaos, and it is troubling because the risks are clearly there. But I believe the relationship goes beyond prime ministers, goes beyond presidents. In the United States, we've got the Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. We have governors. In Canada, we've seen a resurgence of exercising of influence by the premiers. You referenced Premier Ford. You could reference Premier Legault's really powerful op-ed piece that was published yesterday.
Yes.
And so you have the premiers stepping up. But beyond government, you've got the businesses and the business community and business organizations. You've got organized labor on both sides of the border. You've got civil society, nonprofit organizations. By the way, back to government, throw in mayors, city councils, legislative assemblies. You've every single one of those stakeholders values this relationship, cares about this relationship. It is not easy to tear it apart. And that's one of the reasons I keep talking about it in the way in which I talk about it, just to remind all these stakeholders that there's something in this for them, that they need to care about, and they need to step up and to continue to defend, protect, and grow this extraordinary relationship between our two countries.
One of the ways to talk about this subject without talking about hypotheticals is to talk about what has happened. And I wonder, as we discussed frustrations before, have you seen Canada move? Yesterday Canada made a big announcement about border security. And I wonder if there's a frustration that perhaps the Biden administration had made the case previously to Canada on perhaps drugs crossing the border, on perhaps illegal crossings, and now just days before Trump comes into office, there is seemingly action.
So I don't have a frustration. Everything that you're seeing happening have been things that we've been talked about, have been in play for months, if not years. You could ask me the same question about the Hamas peace accord. Mm-hmm. Is it frustrating that the president and secretary of state have been working so hard at this for over a year and a half, and now it's only happening 5 days before Donald Trump is going to be inaugurated? I'm not frustrated. I am happy. I am happy. I'm pleased with the support from the Trump administration for the Hamas peace accord, for the hard work that President-elect Trump's named envoy did alongside Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and the Biden team that was trying to make this happen. And I'm happy for the reinforcement of President-elect Trump of the importance of dealing with the border. As I said, the actions that are being taken now in terms of Canada stiffening the border, those are not actions that could be taken on 1 week's notice or 2 weeks' notice. Yeah. They've been worked on for months. And I'm pleased that Canada has been stepping up and is stepping up to be able to take these actions to help make the northern border an even more defended place. And I will note, as Canada has noted, that even though apprehensions and illegal crossings have increased over the last year or two on our northern border, they are still dwarfed by what is happening on the southern border. It's not to say that we shouldn't be taking actions together to be stemming the flow of drugs. One thing not mentioned is the importance to stem the flow of guns, which is more a south to north issue than a north to south issue.
Have you been pressed on that? Like over the last 3 years, has the Canadian government pressed the United States on guns? Because I'm frustrated about that.
Absolutely, and we have been engaged in discussions. By the way, I happen to be in Quebec as we're talking today, and one of the great successes around guns has been the Quebec Firearms Tracing Center, which was established over the last 3 years and has contributed to a massive increase in the number of firearms being traced in Canada from hundreds to thousands. And the importance of firearm tracing is because firearm tracing is what enables us to identify where these firearms are coming from in Canada to be able to instigate law enforcement actions in the United States to help to stem the flow of firearms coming into Canada. So it's one of the real success stories of the U.S.-Canada relationship over the last 3 years that nobody even talks about.
Is there something that you would advise, would be your advice to Canada in order to avoid some of the more heavy-handed stuff, tariffs, that kind of thing, things that we could do, things that we could put in order in our own house that would make the case for Canada to officials in your country?
My advice to Canada, and I've given the advice, and I've done mostly privately, but I've reiterated it publicly in the last month in response to these kinds of questions, is to keep doing what you're doing. Canada's a great partner, and I'm going to give you another example, which is we have these horrific wildfires in Los Angeles now, and I cannot tell you the scope of the disaster, the scope of the suffering, and Canada has stepped up big time. They haven't even waited to be asked. They have put in place the assets. In today's news, you see 2 more water bombers coming from Quebec and being flown out to California. No simple task, staffed to be able to do this. And Canada has said, and they've been right, that when Canada had need, the United States stepped up in fighting wildfires. Well, the United States has need, and we're going to step up in fighting wildfires, and they have. Yeah. And I will say on air, I want to express the appreciation of California, of Los Angeles, of the United States for Canada stepping up in such an unprecedented way to help us in our time of great need. And that's what Canada needs to do. You need to continue to serve as a friend. You need to continue to step up, continue to work with us on issues of concern to us, like the border, like Haiti, like Ukraine, like defense of the homeland and Arctic defense and Arctic security, like our mutual defenses in the Indo-Pacific.
Is that good enough to make up for the gap in the 2% of GDP spending on defense, or lack there?
So I've never fixated on the 2% of GDP number, but Canada does need to step up its game in investing in defense, and they have. 2015, when Prime Minister Trudeau took office, Canada was spending about 1% of its GDP on defense, 1.37% today, on track to be up to 1.76% by 2029 or 30, and now committed to be at 2% of GDP by 2032. And I think it's important to hear Minister Blair's most recent commentary, where he characterizes this at least 2% of our GDP on defense, quoting Minister Blair, because I don't know that 2% is the right number either. I think that Canada's philosophy on defense spending now is the right philosophy, which is let's look at the threats we're confronting, current threat levels. Let's make sure we're investing in continental defense. Let's make sure we're investing in Arctic defense, which is a huge priority for the United States. And I do see Canada stepping up in different ways today. And I think it is that stepping up that is helping to restore Canada's reputation on the international stage.
Ambassador Cohen, thank you for being very generous with your time this morning. Do put in a good word for whoever takes your post. The next person, let them know that we're very friendly here at CJD, okay?
I will do that. I thought as you were giving that introduction that you were asking me to put in a good word with my successor for bringing baseball back to Montreal.
Please do that as well. It should be high on the agenda, I think, for the good of Canada-U.S. relations, by the way. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Thank you.
David L. Cohen, United States Ambassador to Canada.